The heat had been intense since early morning. The air shimmered above the ground, and the birds had long since fallen silent. Somewhere deep in the tropical forest of India, a fire had broken out. At first, it was as imperceptible as a breath, but within hours, the flames began to consume everything in their path. The fire moved quickly. Dry leaves, dead grass, and fallen branches burst into flames instantly. Animals fled for their lives. Deer, wild boars, monkeys, everyone who could ran away. But not everyone was so lucky. When the rescue team arrived at the edge of the fire, the smoke stood like a wall. Among them was Arjun, a young forest ranger who had only recently been hired. He had never seen how quickly nature could turn into hell. They walked around the area, checking to see if any animals were trapped. Through the thick smoke, he suddenly heard a sound. Not a roar, not a squeal, but a hoarse, ragged moan. Away from the main group, at the edge of the forest, where the fire was already approaching the trees, he saw something incredible. Lying exhausted on the ground was a tiger cub. Very young, maybe a year old. Its side heaved heavily with each breath. Its paws trembled. Its gaze was clouded and frightened. Its fur was covered in ash, its whiskers singed. There was no sign of its mother nearby. For a moment, Arjun froze. His instinct told him to run. He was facing a predator, albeit a weak one. But at that moment, a burning branch fell from the nearest tree. The tiger cub twitched, but couldn't get up. There was no choice. The fire was approaching. Time was running out. Arjun threw his jacket on the ground, wet it from his flask, wrapped it around his hands, and, almost without thinking, stepped toward the beast. Arjun ran up to the tiger cub, his heart pounding in his chest. The animal was frightened, but did not move. It did not growl or struggle, as if it understood that it was not facing an enemy. The ranger carefully picked it up, feeling its hot body tremble in his arms. The cub was lighter than he expected, which was worrying. It was too weak for its age. Apparently, the smoke had done its job. The flames continued to advance. The heat hit him from the side, and Arjun ducked sharply, shielding the cub with his body. A branch collapsed above them, setting the grass on fire. He got up without hesitation and ran. Every step was difficult. Slippery rocks, smoke obscuring his vision, the fire getting closer. One wrong step, and they would both be trapped. He felt ash filling his throat, and his eyes could barely see through the smoke. Suddenly, there was a clearing on the right, a path leading to a stream. Arjun rushed there, pressing the cub to his chest. There wasn't much water, but it would be enough, if he made it in time. The main thing was not to stop. Arjun stopped by the stream and almost collapsed to his knees. His legs were shaking with fatigue, his lungs were burning from the smoke, and there was not a dry spot left on his face. But he held the tiger cub until the end. And now he carefully laid it down on the damp grass by the water. The small body was trembling. It was alive, but exhausted, as if the last ember of life was dying inside it. Arjun quickly wet a handkerchief in the stream, applied it to the cub's forehead, and carefully wiped its muzzle, removing soot and smoke. The skin under the fur was hot, the lips were dry, and the breathing was erratic. Its paws were scraped, one side was burned, but fortunately, the burns appeared to be superficial. Arjun opened his field first aid kit, his hands trembling, but he poured antiseptic on the most damaged paw and wrapped it with a thin bandage. He wasn't a veterinarian, but at least he could ease the pain and prevent the wounds from festering. The flames in the distance had already subsided. Smoke rose in columns, but the fire was retreating. A cry came from deep in the forest. The rescue team was approaching. Someone called on the radio, someone waved at him, but he did not respond. He was still sitting next to the tiger cub, as if he did not want to take his eyes off it. Before him was no longer a wild beast. Before him lay a creature thrown by fire to the brink of life and death, and at that moment it was completely dependent on humans. He ran his hand over its head, gently, almost like a father putting a child to bed, and suddenly the tiger cub opened its eyes. Slowly, heavily, but consciously. Their eyes met, and there was no fear in those eyes. There was no threat either, only fatigue, and a warm, incomprehensible silence inside. Arjun felt a wave rise in his chest. He had done it. He had pulled him out. He had not let him die there in the flames. When the main rescue team arrived, Arjun was already sitting on the ground, leaning against a fallen tree, with the tiger cub sleeping on his lap. For the first time in a long time, the forest had grown a little quieter. The smoke was dissipating, the flames had receded, and only ash swirled gently in the air. "You're alive, little one," Arjun whispered, addressing no one but himself and the animal. Two veterinarians in protective masks approached him. One of them gently placed a hand on Arjun's shoulder. "We'll take him to the rehabilitation center. He's still small. He has a chance." Arjun didn't want to let go of the tiger cub. He had held it in his arms for so long, felt its little heart beating, seen how it clung to life. But he knew that now he had to entrust it to others. The cub was carefully transferred to a carrier. It stirred slightly, as if sensing the change, but there was no panic or fear in its eyes. It just stared. It stared straight at Arjun and seemed to understand that he was the one who had saved it. The ranger stood up and watched the car until it disappeared behind the trees. His hands felt unusually empty. He took a deep breath of the scorched air and, for the first time that day, felt a lightness in his chest. He had saved someone whom the forest itself had already considered lost. 2 weeks passed. The forest healed, but did not forget. Where fire had once raged, charred trees now stood blackened. But in one of the rehabilitation centers, surrounded by silence and care, a small miracle was taking place. The tiger cub had survived. He was still weak, but with each passing day, he stood on his paws with more confidence. The veterinarians named him Agni, which means fire in Sanskrit. The name he received in the flames had now become a symbol of his strength. Arjun came to see him almost every day. He sat by the fence, not crossing the boundary, just watching. Agni was wary at first, but he didn't growl. He looked at him with a familiar calmness, as if remembering something. On the third day, the tiger cub approached him himself. Not too close, but closer than to others. And a week later, he rubbed against the fence for the first time when he saw Arjun. Everyone froze. It wasn't training. It was trust that cannot be bought or tamed. Arjun cautiously reached out his hand. The tiger cub slowly touched it with his nose. And at that moment, it became clear. Something more than a chance encounter had developed between them. Fire had almost separated them, but it was fire that brought them together. Almost a year had passed. Agni had grown up. From a frightened cub, he had turned into a strong, beautiful young tiger. His coat shone with a new luster, his muscles had become more powerful, and his gait was confident. But the most important thing remained unchanged. There was still that strange, quiet calm in his eyes, the same calm with which he had first looked at Arjun by the stream. The decision to return him to the wild was not an easy one. Many said that after such contact with humans, a tiger could lose its wildness. But Agni did not fit any of the rules. He remained independent, hunted on his own in the enclosure, and avoided strangers. He was ready. The day of his release was cool. In the morning, in the twilight, Arjun himself opened the cage set at the edge of the forest. Agni did not come out immediately. He stood for a moment, taking in the smells of his native land, and then stepped outside, slowly but confidently. He stopped at the edge of the trees, turned back, and looked at Arjun for a moment. Not as a guard, not as an enemy, but as someone with whom he had once been close, at the very edge of life. Their eyes met, and that was enough. And then, silence. Only a light breeze rustled the leaves, and the tiger's silhouette disappeared among the trees. Arjun stood there for a long time, looking in that direction. He knew that they had both changed. The forest had given him the tiger to remind him that even the wildest creature could be saved, and those who save others remain part of their journey forever.